Hi there. So I'm Ed Berry, a senior data scientist at Sky Betting and Gaming. And what I want to talk about today is how we make use of machine learning and big data to protect customers from gambling related harm. So just a little bit of a sort of background on me before I get into it. So I guess I sort of started out working with data and doing data science during my PhD in psychology at the University of Leeds. I then moved to Leeds Institute for Data Analytics, where I was a data science intern working with Sky Bet on some models to identify problem gamblers. I then moved over to Sky Bet as a data scientist, and I'm still at Sky Bet now, a senior data scientist. So I guess for that whole time from my internship through to now, I've been thinking about safer gambling, doing the modeling around that, and it's still, very much a focus for me. So just to give some sort of additional background about who Sky Bet and Gaming are. So we've got a sort of number of brands within the UK, covering sort of our sports book. So Sky Bet, sports betting on, football, rugby, tennis, politics, various things. We also have a number of gaming products. So we have a bingo product. We have a casino product, which is, sort of traditional casino games, including with sort of including live casino games, streams of them. We have a poker product as well. And then finally we have Vegas, which I guess is our largest gaming product, which is your sort of, online scratch card slots, whatever. And we're an entirely online operator, so we don't have any shops. And we're also part of the Flutter Group, which is the sort of largest betting and gaming group in the world, and includes other brands like Paddy Power, Betfair, PokerStars, among others. So that's sort of a bit of feel for us. In terms of where we're based, we're sort of based in Leeds. So we've got, over 1,000 people based here in Leeds. So we've always had a big sort of, hub here in Yorkshire. I guess the sort of question to then turn to more specifically to this course is this talk is then, why this sort of why safer gambling as a topic? Why is this something that I, as a data scientist, am working on? So gambling is it's a very prevalent thing. A lot of people do it. Estimates from the Gambling Commission are that around sort of 47% of people over 16 have gambled on some activity in the last 4 weeks. And that includes things like the National Lottery, say in-person bingo halls, machines in, say, pubs, in betting shops, online, a range of things. And then in addition, sort of 21% of over 16s have gambled on some online activity in the past 4 weeks. So you can see, it's a lot of people, it's a prevalent thing, gambling. But, despite gambling being something that a wide range of people enjoy, there is obviously a risk there associated with it, and sort of estimates from the sort of health survey of 2018 sort of estimate that around sort of nearly 3% of over 16s are sort of low risk gamblers, according to something called the PGSI, which is the sort of gold standard problem gambling screen. You've got another sort of nearly 1% at moderate risk, and then around sort of 0.5% being defined as problem gamblers. Now, whilst obviously these percentages are small, when you consider the prevalence of gambling, they nevertheless equate to, potentially hundreds of thousands of people. And therefore it's really important that, we as an operator are doing everything we can to try and protect customers, and that we're working, across the industry and with various organizations to ultimately protect customers from gambling related harm. I guess thinking more about, this is a data science problem, there's a lot of challenges with thinking about gambling related harm, which, are the reason that it's something that has been, interesting to work on for the last sort of 2.5 years or nearly 3 years. And it's something that, I still am thinking about, and we're still, still developing around. because ultimately gambling related harm is very multifaceted. It can include financial harms around spending too much money, more than you can afford, but there's also non-financial harms around the amount of time you might spend gambling, and things like that. We also, in addition, which I guess makes this tricky from a data science perspective, is that we don't have a straightforward set of kind of ground truth problem gambler labels. We don't just have a sample of customers that we know are problem gamblers and that we can do, that we can treat as a pretty straightforward kind of supervised learning task. It's not as straightforward as that. So we have to think more deeply, I guess, to try and tackle that. So how do we go about tackling it? Whilst we don't have a sort of gold standard ground truth set of labels, we do have various sort of indicators available to us, which I'll kind of talk about a bit. I think also working with analytical teams plays a really key role in this, because those are people who have a great deal of sort of domain expertise and a real deep understanding of customers and the industry and things like that, and can therefore help shape the sorts of behaviors we should be looking at. And equally, research is really important there. So we've got an excellent in-house research team who do lots of work with customers, that again allows us to understand how customers think about gambling related harm, the sorts of things that sort of behaviors that concern them, and the sorts of things that they might want from an operator. And also we work with external experts as well. So that might be, experts by experience, people that have actually, had gambling problems, talking to us about their experiences, about the challenges for them, about the things they might have wanted operators to have done, and also working with experts, I guess, in the more sort of academic world as well, who research problem gambling and again can help us on that, and also working with external therapists and things like this, people that really are hands-on with problem gambling. So to give you a feel of sort of one of these indicators that I mentioned that we make use of, probably the sort of industry standard that all operators will likely be using is sort of self-exclusion data. So for those that don't know, customers are able to exclude themselves from gambling on some or all products with an operator for anything from 6 months up to 5 years. And this is something that all licensed operators will offer, and there's also an industry-wide scheme that's launched more recently called GamStop, which allows people to go to one service, and that then will exclude them on all operators. And I guess thinking about this sort of information, we might think that okay, self-exclusions gives us some sort of indicator that somebody might be experiencing gambling-related harm, because potentially people are going to exclude from gambling because they have a problem with their gambling. And I think that's absolutely the case for some people, but there are also potential other reasons why somebody might self-exclude, which is why we wouldn't want to use this as our only kind of indicator, because people may be self-excluding simply because they want a break from gambling, they're not happy with an operator, they want to close their account, and that potentially might not be because they're experiencing gambling related harm. And that sort of feeling comes out in some of the research that's been done, which has really sort of been influential on our thinking in this space, because so PwC did some work for Gamble Aware around modeling problem gambling and how to work with the data that's available to online operators. And they found that 80% of self-defined problem gamblers have never used a self-exclusion tool. And equally that only about a third of people that have self-excluded in the past self-define as problem gamblers. And by self-define here, what they mean is when they fill out a problem gambling questionnaire. So the PGSI that I mentioned, when people fill that out, that's the sort of measure of being a problem gambling here. So you can see that there's a significant chunk of people who, according to that survey, are identifying themselves as problem gamblers who haven't used self-exclusion tools. And therefore, there's clearly a pocket of customers you would miss by only focusing on self-exclusion. And equally, people that have used self-exclusions before, only a subset of those seem to be identifying as problem gamblers. So again, that's kind of enforcing that feeling there are other reasons that people might self-exclude. So what do we do around that? The approach then has to be that we look at alternate indicators. We can't just focus on self-exclusions in the way that might be sort of standard in a lot of the industry. And there's a number of different things we've sort of done in this space. One thing we've done is actually go out and try and collect identifiable problem gambling survey responses. So using that PGSI, the problem gambling severity index that I mentioned, actually if we collect that data for customers who we then have all the additional information about their sort of gambling behavior, does that then become something we can build a model on? We've done some work in that space, and we found it interesting, and it is something we're able to model, but there are limitations around the sort of self-report, and I guess a disjunct between at times people's self-reported gambling behavior and the ground truth, at least with us, of how much they are actually gambling. So there's still sort of complications there. I think another really important data set we have as well is the sort of records around manual account reviews. So we have a team that are reviewing around sort of 100 accounts a day, and phoning customers, restricting accounts, these sorts of things. And obviously we have a record of those reviews of what somebody, after looking at holistically at an account, what sort of interaction they've decided is warranted. And we can think of that as another sort of labeled data set that gives us an indication of, okay, well, these experts within the organization have decided this customer, is a high risk, needs to have a phone call, for example. There are obviously still potential limitations of those sorts of data sets that if you then build a model off it, are you potentially kind of, reifying the, any sort of gaps you might have in your existing processes. So it always has to have other things that try and work around that. I think we've also done work around sort of particular behavioral patterns as well. So for example, coming up with metrics to quantify loss chasing behaviors. So the idea that if somebody's had a big loss, and they come back and bet more to try and win their money back, actually trying to identify, come up with metrics to quantify that so you can identify those sorts of behaviors. And something we've also done a lot of work on, dating right back to the sort of collaboration with Leeds Institute for Data Analytics when I was there, was around sort of affordability modeling. So trying to make use of some of the open data sets there are around, how incomes vary by age and geographic location, to try and get a feel for when customers might be gambling unaffordably, so that we can, have additional sort of checks and things like that for such customers. And that's just sort of feel of how we've tried to expand things out so that ultimately we can get at different facets of problem gambling with different techniques that ultimately will give us a more holistic and comprehensive view than one approach. Obviously, this brings its own challenges then around consistency as well, that, yes, it makes sense to have multiple models that look at this in different ways, but it's then key that you nevertheless have a consistent approach that means that, you don't have, customers who maybe are at risk according to one model that's used in one area and then they're somehow missed in other ways. So it's important to also think about how all this stuff is joined up, and that's a key thing we spend time thinking about as well. I think something to highlight here as well is that there's always going to be a place for sort of simpler rules with this problem. So, this is something that both comes from our own experience and also comes through from the sort of regulators and other organizations in this space, is that there are just certain behaviors that you would want to have a hard and fast rule about. If a customer does a certain thing, if something happens on a customer's account, we would just want that to trigger something, and whatever a more complex model might say, we just want, there are just certain things that you don't want to see that you need to act on. And I think the key to where sort of big data technologies come in here is that they allow us to deliver the data, to build out these hard and fast rules in a way that is performant, by doing some of the work we've done around sort of curating data points here and using some of these big data technologies and automation, things like, our on-premises Hadoop cluster and an Impala within that, and Kafka, to really get those data points to people in a timely manner that then allows them to, to act on certain behaviors. I think something as well that we've kind of done a lot of, which I guess is kind of tangential to the sort of data science stuff, but I think also a really important thing, and something that I've nevertheless been involved in as a sort of data scientist within our Safer Gambling team, is some of the sort of education and awareness work we've done. So on the left is a sort of screenshot of our Simple Tools advert that we ran a few years back, which was sort of raising that awareness, hopefully, of customers and of gamblers of the different tools that are available. So things like deposit limits that you allow you to restrict how much you can deposit, cool offs as well that allow you to sort of take a short break from gambling, and then also profit and loss, which is the tool sort of shown in the middle, which gives customers a view of stakes versus returns for their account. So this is something where I think, I'm really kind of happy of the way that we went kind of above and beyond on in creating this tool. So all operators need to give customers a view of this. It's something they're required to do, but in a lot of cases, it's quite a sort of basic view. And what we did instead was try to really build out something that was, that looked good, that was intuitive for customers, and gave people that view of actually, how much have they staked over different time periods, the past week, the past 30 days, and the past 12 months. What have their returns been? So the customer can actually see, oh, I lost this much last month, I lost this much the month prior, I was maybe up this much the month before that, and really give people that awareness and that control of how much they're spending. And this is obviously something that customers have really appreciated, and we found a lot of engagement with. Something more recently we've done as well is our sort of Mythbusters campaign, which has been across our gaming products around a number of the sort of, I guess, myths around gambling that people might believe, and trying to sort of change some of that perception. So things like, belief that if gambling for longer might help you win more than you lose, or that gambling is a good way to make quick money, and actually going to customers and saying, these things are myths, these things aren't true, don't be taken in by them. I think that's another example where it complements some of the other things that you're doing around identifying customers, because if we can have more education, more awareness, more ways for people to control their gambling, then maybe they'll never hit some of these identification models. I think obviously, as I've kind of hinted at so far, none of this work really would be possible without working closely with research and analytics teams, because research and analytics are really key to what behaviors we look at, what behaviors go into machine learning models, how we then go about interacting with customers off the back of models as well, the sorts of I guess decisioning that we do off the back of a model, and then big data and machine learning technologies just give us that ability to do things at large scale and to model some of the complexities that are there. But we're always collaborating closely with people in research, people in analytics, as part of this, and find that very productive. So I guess just to sort of summarize some of the things I've been talking about, identifying gambling related harm is a very important but also difficult and interesting challenge. In order to really achieve this and to protect customers, we need to work with stakeholders across an organization, so within an operator, but also outside of it, across the industry, with regulators, with researchers. And I think more generally, and I guess the takeaway message here is that I think a lot of important data science problems in society are probably quite similar. They have this feature of actually maybe potentially you don't have one ground truth label you can use. Maybe you're dealing with something that's quite multifaceted. And therefore, I think, my advice there would be that to reach out to a wide range of people, to work with, across disciplines, to work with people in analytics, people in research, both within an organization and externally, to really build that understanding. And I think that's where, having in myself dedicated data scientists thinking about a problem like this really allows you to build up that deep domain expertise and build relationships with people that ultimately help with these sorts of things. So just to sort of finish up with sort of, I guess, thanks for various people. So I just want to thank the sort of data science and safer gambling teams here at Skybet for the sort of involvement in all this work and feedback on this presentation. I also want to thank Leeds Our Users Group, who initially sort of reached out to AI Tech North and sort of build that relationship that led to this sort of talk. So what Leeds Our Users Group is, we're a user group in Leeds for our users, and you can sort of follow us on Twitter and see our website to sort of get involved. We recently had a remote meetup that went really well, and we'll be looking to do more of that. So we're always interested to talk to speakers. Yeah, and I'd like to particularly thank sort of Louise and Trina from that group for the work they've done there.